Hello and welcome to the Global eProcure webinar on advanced negotiations. Hi, I'm Steve Bucalo, Vice President Leader of the Energy and Utility Practice for Global eProcure. I've served the energy and utility industry for over 30 years, providing strategic sourcing consulting to leading companies worldwide. My teams have negotiated over $5 billion of new contracts covering over 100 categories of spend. Now a little bit about Global eProcure. We were founded in 1999. Today we have over 300 highly qualified professionals focusing exclusively in the sourcing and procurement field. We have global coverage and serve over 120 customers in 20 different industries, including energy and utilities. We manage over $50 billion of spend across more than 200 categories. We offer our clients, in addition to consultancy, fully integrated technology supporting all source-to-pay functions. And we are a minority and women-owned enterprise. Now let's begin to discuss the art of negotiations. Negotiations require three key factors. The first, preparation. Preparation in using best practice techniques and methods. Second, outcomes which are mutually acceptable and sustainable. And we must always remember that a defeated opponent is not a good long-term partner. And thirdly, processes that are transparent, that are efficient, and that are fair. Now we have designed our negotiations management process into 7 integrated steps, and they include establishment of the negotiations team, analysis of supplier proposals, assessment of your bargaining position and relationship with the supplier, a defined and well-documented negotiation strategy, preparation for the negotiation session, conduct and execute the negotiations, and have timely follow-up and meaningful feedback to all participants. The first step is to establish the negotiations team. Now it is very important to predefine and select key members of your negotiations team. Typically they involved and include 4 key components. The first is the leader. The leader drives the process to assure that the desired outcomes are achieved. The second role is the facilitator, who keeps the discussions moving forward in accordance with the agenda and the agenda's specified timelines. The third is the subject matter expert. This is the in-house category expert or experts, typically the end user with significant experience in the supplier's service, product, material, or equipment. And finally, the record keeper, to keep accurate and timely notes of all discussions within the negotiations and follow-up requirements. The second step of our integrated process is to analyze supplier proposals. It is very important to establish the optimal best response for each item in the proposal across each of the suppliers to establish a benchmark of the ideal offer. So let's look at this slide. For example, on this slide we show 3 suppliers. When you look at the items which each supplier responded to, you'll see that various suppliers have achieved the highest individual benchmark within these requirements. So for example, in percentage dollars covered, supplier 2 has 100% and has the highest response. Similarly, supplier 2 has the highest response on SKUs covered. but when one goes down to the value-added expertise, it is supplier one. So it is important to look at and identify the best response in each category and identify that as the benchmark. The next slide uses the same approach, but specifically to cost, and should suggest to unbundle cost to highlight the variations at the element level, again to seek to achieve the benchmark. So looking again, there are um, um, several important cost elements being reviewed: raw materials, machine setup, machine run cost, finishing, total cost, and quoted price. If one looks at the four top candidates on the bottom of this slide, you'll see that each various suppliers have provided the most opportunistic response to the cost elements. So on raw materials, it's supplier D. On machine setup, it's supplier C. On machine run, it's supplier D. On finishing, it's supplier B. If one was to look at the total cost in this example for 1,000 units and look at the supplier that has offered the lowest cost, you would select supplier D. But when unbundling the cost elements and identifying the best offer in each element, you would see that the total cost for those 1,000 units reduces from 54.60 in supplier D to 51.30, or a 6% reduction. It is that 51.30 that is the ideal cost to be achieved. Assess your bargaining position and relationship. Step number 3. It is very important to take a critical perspective of how your organization is viewed by the supplier. And we like to use this 4-quadrant approach. In the upper right-hand quadrant is the suggestion that the suppliers view your organization as a strategic account. In that regard, your company is viewed as critical in terms of the supplier's business model. The supplier is typically willing to trade margin for volume and confirmation of ongoing business. The supplier is willing to invest to retain the business. In short, having your business is very important to the supplier and to their intentions within your industry. As an investment account, um, again, a long-term view of the relationship that the supplier would like to create with your organization. They view you as a potential growth account, typically a leader in your industry. They're willing to reduce margins to gain your business, and they're willing to invest for the future. Both the strategic account, which is typically at a maturity level, and the investment account are very positive perspectives and have long-term views of investment. Now, on the other side, if the supplier views your organization as either a nuisance account, meaning that there is significant cost in doing business with you, that they may actually look at dropping you as a supplier, or if they see that their position is one of declining business value, that they're likely to lose the business anyway, that in these situations there's a short-term maximize the profit um, relationship with which is important to recognize as you enter into a possible negotiation with these suppliers. Now, in once you understand your position in the eyes of the supplier, it is very important to improve your bargaining hand before entering the negotiations. And there are several key factors to allow you to do that. The first is for your team to have complete knowledge of what the fair market value is for the product or service which you are procuring. Next is to minimize the uniqueness of the requirements so that the requirements can be matched by a wide number of suppliers. Third is to aggregate your volumes and provide a forecast of predictable volumes so that you can request best price based on volume discounts. The next is to minimize the switching risk and switching cost of moving from your existing incumbent supplier to a new supplier. Next is to understand in priority order your desired outcomes, your wants, and your must-haves. Another important bargaining position is to identify multiple suppliers. Again, that goes hand in hand with minimizing the uniquenesses of the requirement. From an internal change management perspective, it is very important to gain full support of the internal stakeholders for the possible change in the supplier. Always present your company as a premier customer and a bellwether organization in your respective industry, and formalize and have a clearly structured negotiations process. Step 4. Define negotiation strategy. It is very important to fully define the desired outcome before entering the negotiations. What your needs or must-haves are, what your wants are, what you're willing to trade, and what is your walkaway position. At Global eProcure, we define this in three items. 1. The most desired outcome or most desired agreement. 2. The least acceptable agreement. And then in between, the best alternative agreement. And that creates, as we would refer to, as the negotiations domain. Now, in a most desired agreement, it's important for your team to identify what that most desired outcome might look like. And those are our wants. They may include best price in the market, shortest delivery time possible, performance exceeding specifications, and longer price guarantees. Now on the other side, what would be our least acceptable agreement? What are the items which we must have? Prices that meet the established saving goals for this category. Market expected delivery time. Performance that meets our specifications, and price firm for 1 year. Again, establishing the parameters of the negotiation domain between most desired attributes and least acceptable attributes. Step 5. Prepare for the negotiation session. Now, it is said that the preparation for the negotiation session utilizes about 70% of the total time for the negotiation, and about 30% is in the actual execution. And in the preparation, one of the key elements is to prepare and issue a well-structured agenda. And the agenda, as shown as an example here, includes the subject items to be covered, which of your team's owners will facilitate that portion of the subject, and what's the allotted time. You can see clearly that in our previous negotiations team definition that the facilitator has a very important role as the leader shown here. In addition, the subject matter experts provide their very important input supporting the leader in key issues, underlining interest agreement, and in unresolved issues. And the record keeper keeps very accurate notes on all items covered within this well-structured agenda. Again, what are the subjects to be covered? who owns that in the discussion, and what is the time allotment for each. In preparation for the negotiation session, it is very important for the team to carefully prepare and anticipate questions and responses. So, for example, typical questions that we have seen in our negotiations are: how many suppliers are invited to negotiations? Now, what is your possible answer that you have anticipated to discuss? The number of suppliers is not fixed at this stage, and who will be making the final decision? The final decision will be made by the director and the board. How did we rank in the last round of quoting? Your supplier scorecard shows overall competitiveness. So again, anticipate the questions and rehearse the possible answers and which member of the team will respond to each of these questions. In establishing and preparing for the negotiations, it's important to use a template or a worksheet as that's shown here. So on the worksheet, you'll see certain key attributes associated with the proposal as a supplier: the price, the quality, the service. And then the team will identify what issues we have with each attribute. What are the key messages within each attribute that we want to convey to the supplier? And then in the gaming side of being prepared, what is their anticipated response to that message? What is our counter response? What are our must-haves? What are our nice-to-haves? What are our concessions? And what is the priority? This tactical worksheet must be established prior to entering into the negotiations. Now, actually conducting the negotiations. Um, Having established the agenda, having completed our worksheets, understanding what might be the questions and the responses, what are the priorities, we are now ready to actually conduct the negotiations. The negotiations are an iterative process. It's not an event, and it typically requires 2 or more sessions. With that in mind, the slide in the document depicts a possible workflow. Conduct the negotiations. Are the outcomes acceptable? If they are, move into a contracting phase. If they're not, communicate in written form the outstanding issues to the supplier. Uh, Prepare for the next round of negotiation with them submitting their revised offer, and continue until acceptable outcomes are achieved, which are mutually acceptable by both parties. The negotiation session should be conducted in a professional manner. A couple points that work successfully are: be professional, be on time, stay throughout the meeting, have all useful data with you, be well prepared on the objectives of the meeting, keep control of the meeting, and again, that is the role of the facilitator. Follow the agenda. Be prepared to switch to the next topic before running out of time, and use the facilitator as our timekeeper. Ensure the supplier understands the key messages. Don't hesitate to reformulate. Use a timeout option when appropriate. Reorient the strategy according to the supplier's input. Finally, document the key discussion points through the record keeper that has been identified. Areas of agreement on commercial, non-commercial issues, open issues, and necessary next steps to get closure, and the to-dos by each party, and the firm dates when they are required. Step 7, follow-up and feedback. Provide timely feedback to all suppliers. Provide feedback on the negotiations meeting and the supplier's performance. Make sure that the agreed upon action items are and have been addressed. Request and receive revised written proposals on specific items that are outstanding. Discuss and plan the next steps with the supplier, or inform the supplier that they are no longer in the process and that they've been eliminated. In that case, make sure that um, that you leave on a positive note with the supplier. As you conclude the negotiations, make sure that you use company standard formats and templates when finalizing the agreement. These include documentation and confirmation of all agreed terms, some that have been verbal or written, before the formal contracts are drafted and signed. Using the appropriate and approved legal standard frameworks to be sure that you went through all the points which will be in the future contract. Obtain the appropriate reviews and signatures from both parties. Update any pricing or transaction database with the new information. Update the contract monitoring database if one exists, and track the results and report back to all stakeholders. Thank you for your time today. I hope that you have found our approach to negotiations helpful and that you use this to establish contracts which will bring significant value to your organization and strengthen your relationship with your supplier community. Thank you.